This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the DocNJock Wrestling Podcast. This is episode 199, almost at 200. I'm your host, Adam the Jock Straczynski. Doing the show with me, as always, is the one, the only, the Doc, John Macaroon. On today's episode, we're going to get into quite a few things. Dave Meltzer has a report about this troubled WWE superstar coming back to the company. Also, what might be going on at WrestleMania 38. Dave Meltzer's got the scoop on that, and I'm going to give it to you. Of course, we're going to take a look at what's going on with AEW, Impact Wrestling, and we got to break down what's been happening with WWE. Again, doing it with me as always. He is the one. He is the only. He is my Macho Man to my Queen, Scary Sherry. He is the Doc, John Macaroon. Am I the Macho Man or are you the Macho Man? I'm not really sure. What's going on, cuz?
It's all good, cuz. Now, this is funny. Now, this may be a revelation. We may have to do some fact-checking, but maybe because you're the one that does the scheduling and you put together the rundown, this is indeed episode 200. Along the way, I think you skipped one. Yes, because last week you opened the show at 199, or you said 198, and then I put it together. Now, there is a small chance, because I'm doing 49 other things usually at the same time, that I skipped over one, jump one. But I typically, the way to do it is if you go back through our YouTube page, if you see the numbers, if there's one that skipped, there could be one that's out of order. I could see that happening, but my spidey senses says that this is episode 200, baby. Accomplishment.
Right, let's go with it.
Yeah, this is episode 200, so now you can change it on your sheet. It's been funny. I giggled a little bit last time, and I'm like, either he doesn't know or I don't know, but it's funny nonetheless. But I'm ready to talk some wrestling, baby. The draft concluded, and a bunch of other things going on in AEW. Good shit to talk about this week, for sure.
Look, me making the mistake on the episode number, not the first time this has happened.
Exactly.
And you called me out on it before. So this has happened before. I think, what happens is when I'm putting everything together, I will save it at the very end. And when I save it, I usually change the episode number at the very top of the sheet because I'm just reusing the same sheet. Like the sheet that we have is the very first sheet we ever did our very first episode on. It's just the number has changed and I have saved over. So it wouldn't surprise me if this is episode 200. So my bad on that. We are now on episode 200. I'm glad you know what's going on. With all the other things you've got going on, you got to keep me in check. Absolutely crazy. Look at you. You need your own assistant. But like you said, WWE, Monday Night Raw concluded what took place with the draft. Going by what we're getting on Smackdown on Friday night, WWE doesn't really seem to care about a whole lot, because they're building towards Crown Jewel, which is really and truly, I think in both of our estimations, it is a pay-per-view that's just kind of there. It doesn't really do anything, doesn't tie any long-term storytelling into place. This year might be a little bit different. Like I said, you're going to want to wait around until the news and notes segment because we'll give you a little bit of insight. But usually what takes place at Crown Jewel is kind of like a one-off. A lot of times you'll have multiple storylines going on all at the same time. So because of that, I kind of wanted to lump Raw and SmackDown and anything with NXT, just kind of lump it all together. And I wanted to ask you, what pick shocked you the most? And I want to go over the draft picks that took place on the episodes. All right. So Becky Lynch moves to Raw. No big surprise, I think, for anybody, especially after the first night on SmackDown last week. Bobby Lashley MVP stay on Raw. Seth Rollins moves to Raw. Damian Priest stays on Raw. AJ Styles and Omos stay on Raw. Kevin Owens moves to Raw. The Street Profits move to Raw. Finn Balor moves to Raw. Karrion Kross stays on Raw. Alexa Bliss stays on Raw. Carmella moves to Raw. Gable Stevenson moves to Raw. Now, on SmackDown, the Usos will stay on SmackDown. Sasha Banks will stay on SmackDown. Shinsuke Nakamura and Rick Boogs will stay on SmackDown. Sheamus moves to SmackDown. Shayna Baszler moves to SmackDown. Xia Li gets called up from NXT to go to SmackDown. Viking Raiders move to SmackDown. Ricochet moves to SmackDown. Humberto Carrillo and Angel Garza move to SmackDown. Nice little tag team they're forming. Cesaro stays on SmackDown. Ridge Holland gets called up from NXT to go to SmackDown. Sami Zayn stays on SmackDown. He was pretty pissed that he was the last draft pick. Now, you'll remember as well, just to kind of recap everything, from the first night, Big E goes to Raw, Bianca Belair goes to Raw, RK Bro stays on Raw, Edge goes to Raw, Rhea Ripley and Nikki ASH are on Raw. Keith, worst name in the history of the business, Bearcat Lee goes to Raw. Rey and Dominic Mysterio go to Raw. Austin Theory gets called up from NXT to go to Raw. Roman Reigns stays on SmackDown. Charlotte stays on SmackDown. Drew McIntyre moves to SmackDown. New Day goes to SmackDown. Happy Corbin and Madcap Moss go to SmackDown. Hit Row gets called up and goes to SmackDown. Naomi goes to SmackDown. Jeff Hardy goes to SmackDown. So there was a whole lot that went on there. There were also picks that took place off the episode. And really getting into all of that, I think, is just kind of a massive waste of our time. So I just kind of wanted to keep it narrowed down to these picks, the first 2 nights. Out of all of those, what shocked you the most?
Yeah, a lot. I thought that, obviously with the women, it kind of appeared like they just switched sides, and things like that. But I thought the debut of Hit Row was pretty spectacular. Nothing shocked me per se. I think that obviously you got a sense that the couples lined up, with maybe the one that potentially you didn't have to do was moving Seth Rollins to Raw. I thought that he was somebody that if you decided to keep him on SmackDown, he could have been the star of that show. Now, understandably, they want to continue that feud, but it's just kind of weird that they just moved the 2 guys from SmackDown over to Raw. So it kind of is more like feud specific in terms of that, to have Edge go over there and as well as to have Seth Rollins. But understandably too, because Becky Lynch is now showing up on Monday Night Raw. I like I said, and it's no secret if you listen to this podcast, I am a huge supporter of Seth Rollins. I put him up there in the echelon of an individual that can wrestle with the likes of a Shawn Michaels. That's how talented he is. This character is interesting, and it's been developed, and it's one of the characters that has been flushed out and kind of has evolved with what they're trying to do, but it's just not my cup of tea. I love his entrance. I love the way he kind of silhouettes and twirls, and he kind of has the rhythm down. And looking back, I taped an entrance when he came to Detroit in the last house show, and it's just awesome. He's just kind of prancing down to the ring along with the music, and it is an enhanced version of a character, which is fine. But I just think that Seth Rollins, if you kept him on SmackDown, you could have even flushed out a little bit more down the road of, hey, because you've teased it, if you recall, if you've been paying attention to SmackDown, when Cesaro was in the mix and you were introducing that feud with Seth Rollins, then you had, Seth helping out Roman Reigns. And for me, I think that Seth is a believable character if you want to have him be a reclamation project and he goes over and becomes a face against Roman Reigns. I would watch that because you could tell a story that has a lot of deeper layers with the Shield and with the fact that I believe it was Seth Rollins who broke apart the Shield when he decided to go on his own. You could do so much with it. Revenge on Roman Reigns' part, competitiveness on Seth Rollins. So for me, I wasn't shocked, but I was a little disappointed in Seth Rollins moving over. But I mean, I guess the other thing that was disappointing was how de-emphasized The Miz was. I know he's hurt. I know this is somebody that I believe he stayed on Raw, correct?
The Miz, yes. At this point, he's on Raw.
So, but this is a big deal. This is a guy that's featured on television now on Dancing with the Stars. I know when people get hurt,
he's all over the place, man.
Exactly.
In movies, TV shows, he is.
This is not
he's like the guy who's like the banner carrier for WWE when it comes to like entertainment.
I don't like the fact that it's kind of just done that way for him. But other than that, it's a new roster, which is kind of weird that they're not even going to start it right away, but this is how WWE operates. We're going to do a draft, but pay attention to it because it's not going to start for a couple weeks.
Yeah, so pause right there because that's another question I want to get into with you. I think for me, the biggest shock was bringing a guy like Gable Stevenson to Raw. Like, no wrestling, like he's got an Olympic wrestling background, but he doesn't have a wrestling background. So you're going to bring him in and like, unless this guy is Kurt Angle, and if you remember, Kurt Angle had a few rough patches early on to become one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. Unless he's Kurt Angle, unless that's what you're hoping for, this could blow up in WWE's face. Like, you have NXT, you could start him in NXT, even if he's there for a couple of weeks, and then bring him up. But to basically bring him to what is arguably the headlining roster of Monday Night Raw, it just kind of struck me as odd, was a little bit weird to me. And even in our group message, I was like, why would you take the guy who has like zero wrestling experience and bring him over here? That was strange to me. I thought that was an odd move. I will say this, though. Normally when we have these drafts, it is usually so one-sided because of the way they do it, right? Raw usually gets 3 to every 2 for SmackDown. This year they didn't do that. And I think what you have is you have a pretty balanced roster. Now, I think a lot of that has to do with Fox and the Fox executives demanding a better product, while NBC still wants a good product. So what you have, I think, is you have a really balanced roster with a lot of top-end talent. You know, if you remember before, I think maybe SmackDown might have had the better roster maybe 2 or 3 times. And we've been doing this now for, maybe 15 years? We've had this draft, maybe a little bit less than that. But SmackDown usually gets the short end of the stick on draft night. And what you have here is I think you have 2 evenly matched up rosters. Would you not agree?
Yeah, they're fair. I think that I at this point, I would say that SmackDown gets a B+ and Raw gets a B- in terms of the grades of the rosters. That's how I viewed it.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same step as you. Normally, it's like Raw has an A and like SmackDown has a C. So to see them as even as they are, I think is pretty great. And it should make Survivor Series a little bit more interesting. Like, I know neither one of us really care about Survivor Series. I think a lot of that has to do with how the drafts kind of match up these rosters. But I think what we'll get is a much more compelling Survivor Series when we get to that point. I think what you'll get is a much more compelling storyline in television, and you'll get guys who keep you more gripped to what's going on with the action. Now, you did kind of bring it up, and you did mention it. The draft just took place, but the rosters don't take effect for 2 weeks from now. So we got to get through, again, when they book Crown Jewel goes right in the middle of everything, and like it seems like the world surrounds Crown Jewel, which is silly to me. I know it's a massive payday for WWE, but it is absolutely silly to me to stop everything you're doing for this one non-event that's an event. I don't understand why the drafts don't take place from 2 weeks from now. I guess it's to keep the story continuity for Crown Jewel. I don't know why that's never stopped WWE before. Story continuity has never been a thing that's held WWE up. They just kind of throw stuff at the wall, and if it sticks, it sticks, and if it doesn't, they just retcon it all. Is it strange to you that these drafts aren't taking place yet? Like, it was weird to me to watch a SmackDown episode where they have people who are going to Raw wrestling on SmackDown. Like it was weird to me to see a guy like Finn Balor, who's supposed to be holding it down for Raw, representing SmackDown in his King of the Ring tournament fight. And I'm just like, what the hell is going on here? This is so strange to me. Like, to me, it is odd to see it.
It is. It's absolutely odd to see it because of the fact that I think everybody's just kind of waiting for next. It's kind of like, let's just flush, even though they technically have their season premieres in September, we kind of want to maybe look at Crown Jewel as being the kind of endpoint of the last year that many people just kind of felt was like, blah. So in my opinion, I think everybody's kind of waiting for the new rosters to show up. And it would behoove WWE to kind of do it where maybe you do the draft after Crown Jewel. It kind of makes sense. You have Crown Jewel, this crowning achievement. Maybe you have a title change here or there. And then the next week of programming, you have the draft so that the next week we can get into it and call the season premieres technically in late October. But it doesn't fall in line with TV schedules and stuff like that. And in the overseas market, they pay a big ton of money. So it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to align with how you and I or anybody else will like it. So they just keep on keeping on. And like I said, I just think the interest level is not thriving. It's just right in the middle. You're interested in some things, not in others. Some things are really great. Others are really bad. And you recognize that, the way I'll end this part of my talk is when they said Karrion Kross is staying on Raw, was I excited? No. I was just kind of like, okay, sucks for him. That was my first thought. And This is a character that I think I want to get into, but not that version of this gimmicky individual. So I think that Karrion Kross has a lot of potential, but maybe is going to get lost in the shuffle here on Raw. So that was unfortunately my reaction to it, was like, okay, you have these gimmicky things, and it actually ruins the show too, because here's the thing, which makes no sense, and we've talked about this too. You have 50 other social media channels. I mean, you could even do it where, hey, you pay $5 and you get to watch the draft. And you could have a special. You could have roundtable. Make it like it's real. You know, you have a roundtable where, like, what's going to happen? You have the likes of other wrestlers, Paul Heyman, say, it could be interesting. You know, you have a little roundtable discussion about who's going to show up where. And you have the draft over the course of 2 hours. Put it on Peacock and let's keep it moving. It's just because you have great, like, I think Raw was actually ruined by the draft. You had flow, you had interesting matches, and then all of a sudden these two people are standing there going, in the 5th round, the first, blah, 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 blah. And it was just, it breaks up the flow of an interesting show in my mind. I thought Raw had some things moving for it, but every time they started to crescendo to some momentum, you had these two, you know, I think, was it Adam Pearce and the young
Sonya
lady
Deville.
and Sonya Deville breaking it up. So not my cup of tea in terms of television programming.
Yeah, it wasn't great. Like, I don't know. I don't know how you make it better. Like you said, maybe that round table would be better. I'm not sure. Maybe you even do it as, I don't know. It just, to me, I think it's silly. I really do. But it's what WWE has done for quite a while now, and it's not going to go anywhere. It's part of the fabric of Raw, and it's part of the fabric of SmackDown, and it's kind of what we get. Why don't you give us your review of what you thought on Impact this week?
Yeah, Impact, good show, man. I thought it was really entertaining. We are now moving forward with Impact Bound for Glory, and I'm really excited to see Christian Cage versus Josh Alexander for the Impact World Championship. Deonna Purrazzo is going to take on Mickie James for the Impact Knockouts Championship. The Call Your Shot Gauntlet with Rich Swann, Brian Myers, Moose, and William Morrissey. A lot of good things going on in regards to the setup for Impact. And, you know, obviously you open the show with a decent matchup in my mind when you have Bullet Club with taking on Finn Juice and Chris Sabin in a 6-man tag team match. Really interesting, really good athleticism with the Bullet Club going over. Now the rest of the show, like I said, is just progressing and starting to move the show forward and things like that. So I thought that Christian's backstage segment was fantastic. Moving ahead, the 4th match was Rich Swann and Willie Mack taking on Zicky Dice and Manny Lemons with the Learning Tree. And I thought that, you know, the Learning Tree getting in a little bit, attacking Swann and Mack before the bell ringing was interesting. Damn, Rich Swann has come a long way. That was in my notes. I said that, man, what a character that potentially you thought maybe was going to be moved on from. But in Impact, I think it goes to show you that there are opportunities that you can be reclaimed if you go to the right situation. And so I thought Rich Swann and Willie Mack getting over was correct. Christian's promos, I think, you know, allow the viewer, if you're casual, to really get invested. And even though obviously no one's going to believe that his opponent's going to take down the match, it's, I think, going to be a really good match. And I think that Impact, when they start to build around their bigger pay-per-views, I think their matches kind of step it up a little bit. Here's the problem, though. I just don't understand why they just don't, little by little, invest in their production. Because it's so glaring, it just has the feel like they're wrestling in a bingo hall, but it's on national television, and it's on for a couple hours, and it's so glaring that, you know, that belief that perception is reality, and it's one of those things when you're watching it, it's great wrestling, great storytelling, but the worst production. It's like you're signaling off we're cheap, and I think they have to just find a way to scrape up all their money, figure out a way, because here's the thing, and here's the problem. There's a look that you can present to people, that rugged edge kind of look, but when you got AEW and you got WWE and their $1 million productions, when you present yours in that way, it doesn't come across as different and unique, it comes across as cheap. And that's the perception you don't want to have if you're trying to lure the likes of big-time wrestlers. You know, you don't want to be viewed as the third option. But I think the wrestlers that go there really enjoy their time. They enjoy the work with the people. But unfortunately, they are like mired in this mediocrity in terms of their presentation. And it makes it hard to really sit through and not fast forward because it's just not appealing to the eyes. It's grimy is the best way to put it in terms of television. But the matches are good. If you're I think that's what it is. They have the hardcore fan, but they're not going to get bigger. They're not going to grow in every area unless you put something into the production. And but like I said, give credit to D'Lo Brown, man. He's trying. He's one of the more entertaining announcers out there, and he brings a lot of knowledge. So it was a B+ show. I think if you're looking for that third brand to pay attention to, Impact has been great. Bound for Glory is going to be really interesting. And then the other aspect was really seeing Eric Young and Violent by Design really taking it to Rhino and things like that. So it was interesting. I thought it was a really good show. It's a couple hours. Fast forward through some things that you don't really want to pay attention to if you don't want to. But all in all, Impact steadily climbing in regards to consistent storylines, good execution of matches, and pay-per-views that always deliver. And our boy Kenny is just raving about the quality of their pay-per-views as opposed to the stuff we get from the other brands. But bottom line, you got to improve the production if you want to gain the more casual fan, or at least figure out a way to recreate the design of the set. Maybe just do something different, just to have a ramp from the other side or something totally different, you know?
It is hard to watch it sometimes. It's because it's almost jarring. When you go from watching Impact and you go from watching Raw and SmackDown, even NXT, Impact Wrestling is just best way to put it, just jarring. It's like different, but not different in a good way. You know, AEW gives you something that's nice and pretty unique depending on where they're at. Raw and SmackDown are pretty much consistent with their set. Impact is just so damn different, and it's strange. But I think the one cool thing about Impact, and you touched on it a little bit, Rich Swann, Reclamation Project, a guy like Eric Young does his best work in Impact, where he's given creative license to basically do and tell the stories that he wants to tell. I think Impact is a great brand for not so much for the casual wrestling fan, but for the hardcore wrestling fan and for the person who loves specific characters, because they get to go and be basically their true selves. They get to go and they get to try different things and they get to really embrace wrestling again. Whereas when you're in WWE and you're on Raw or SmackDown, it is, here's your script, this is what you are, this is what you have to do. It's not like that when you wrestle for a company like Impact or another company that we're going to talk about here with AEW. What did you make of AEW? What did you make of Dynamite? What did you make of Rampage? Because I thought both shows were both very, very good. I thought Dynamite was absolutely fantastic. To kick off the show with this multi-man tag match that was pay-per-view quality. I thought it was great. And what I noticed instantly from what you've got going on with AEW, something that I think that they have taken from a company like New Japan. And if you think about where all these guys come from, you know, if you think about where the guys in the Elite have come from, if you think about where a guy like Bryan Danielson has come from, if you think about where a lot of these wrestlers really got some of their big starts, a lot of these guys started over in Japan. And the one thing that they do in Japan to really help save the body of the wrestlers, because in Japan it's much more physical and it's much more taxing than it is here. Here they do a ton of shows every single week. Their matches are just so much more physical. There's a reason why it is called strong style in Japan. Doing the multi-man matches like they do in Japan and bringing that over, AEW, I believe, has embraced that, because you are seeing more and more and more with those multi-man matches. I think it's a good way to help preserve the body of a lot of these younger wrestlers and even the older wrestlers. Getting the multi-man match going, it helps. You don't have to be in the ring going. You know, you could have a 30-minute match. You don't have to be in there for 30 minutes. You can be in there for 5, and you could do your part, and you're going to get everything over, and you can get all your stuff in, and you're going to make that connection with the crowd. But at the same point, you're not out there taxing yourself. So I think it's a great way to help preserve the wrestler's body. And I love that AEW has really embraced that. And to kick off a show with that, like, could you ever imagine WWE just opening up, not going through any promo, not going through any type of a setup, just opening up. You've got 4 guys in the ring already, and then you hit the entrance for the other 4 guys, and you just get into a nice 30-minute match where everything is awesome. Could you imagine WWE ever doing that? Because you get it with AEW, and I think it's fantastic. Do you love the fact that they are embracing the multi-man match, and they are basically serving it up to us with some of the best in their company?
Absolutely. I thought it was definitely a great open to Dynamite. But I think one thing that kind of permeated was after that, it kind of lulled a little bit before you got to the ladder match. And I think kind of it was weird online. The theme was a little bit of dejection that why is CM Punk only wrestling on Friday nights? And I get it why, because he's a main attraction and you're going to make him the highlight of that show. But I think people were kind of a little bit, they're kind of yearning to see CM Punk put on the tights there on Wednesday. But, you know, even though that's not the case, the characters and the development of everything going on Dynamite was good, but I don't think it was the best show that they put out there. And I get what people are saying in terms of the review about it. Obviously, maybe they just didn't feel like, Hangman Page maybe was worthy of winning the opportunity when you have maybe a feud that people want to see 2 and 3 matches back to back. But I thought the crowd loved it. And so you have to also take into account the crowd absolutely popped. You knew it was going to be Adam Hangman Page for the most part. And it was great to see the Joker come out and handle his business. And that was a great ladder match. It was up there. And the crowd loved it. They reacted strongly to something that I think was the right call. Adam Page should be the guy that should have the opportunity. But, you know, in line with the Money in the Bank situation. But I still want to see Omega Danielson too. It's like you're building it up. You teased it. And you might put it on the back burner. I don't know if that's the best idea.
So like Doc has alluded to, we get to our main event, which is a ladder match. And the surprise contestant, Hangman Page, makes his return. I know you said you knew it was coming. I had no idea it was coming. I knew at some point he was going to return. He had a child, and he took some time off to be with his child. That was kind of why everything halted with him and Kenny Omega. Hangman Page returns, climbs the ladder, grabs the poker chip with the ability to cash it in to challenge for the AEW championship. I thought it was great that he came back. I thought the crowd was into it. I don't think he's the wrong choice. I thought he was the right choice if he's going to be in that match to win that. And you do make a good point where it kind of lulls a little bit, but you also have to remember AEW is trying to book 2 programs, right? And I'm trying to figure out still because I'm not sure how their booking goes and how their taping goes. If I'm correct, and I could be wrong, I'm not sure. Like I said, I'm still working on trying to figure it out. I think they tape Rampage the same night that they're doing Dynamite. I think it's Dynamite, and then what happens is they will tape Rampage later in that evening. And I haven't quite figured it out yet. Like I said, I'm still working on it. So I haven't figured out if they're taping basically those 3 hours back to back to back, or if it is a second night. Like I said, I'm not 100% sure yet what's going on there. I usually try to look for a familiar face in the crowd. I'm like, okay, if they're in the same spot, then they're definitely taping it back to back. But CM Punk comes down and he basically forces you now to have to watch what's going to take place on Rampage. And that's why they're bringing him, because they know he's the main attraction. He's the number one guy, right? Whether he has the belt or not, he's the number one guy. So if I come down and say, hey, I'm going to fight on Friday, you're going to tune in on Friday to watch him fight. So I think it's smart on their part by not giving it to you all on Wednesday night. I think Dynamite moves at a really good clip. I don't think Dynamite it slows down. It might lull a little bit, but it's not like anything you get with WWE where it's like, okay, how much longer do we have left of this show? And it just kind of stagnates. It moves. It might slow down, but it moves at least. And circling back to Hangman, Hangman's your surprise entrance, and you get this massive pop, and the crowd is into it. He ends up getting the poker chip. He's now the guy in line, and I think all of us instantly, our thought goes, okay, Hangman Page, Kenny Omega, because they had such a great story, and there's so much there that has been left unfulfilled. Like, he's the guy who's going to dethrone Kenny Omega. Because if you remember, he was supposed to be the guy to dethrone Kenny Omega, but then he went and had a baby, and he left. So, to me, I'm like, this makes perfect sense. Like, this makes perfect sense for him to come back, get the chip, and he's going to be the guy. At some point, like, Daniel Bryanson doesn't need the belt right now. If you take the belt off Kenny Omega, they can have just multiple wars because they put on great shows. There could be nothing. There doesn't have to be that the belt to kind of get in the way of whatever story you want to tell. Remember, when the belt's there, sometimes it's an obstacle. It's something you kind of have to work around, because Kenny Omega originally didn't want to fight him. And Daniel Bryanson had to come out and basically say, hey, I don't want your belt. I just want to fight you. So sometimes it's one of those caveats where you got to work that in and you got to work around the belt. Hangman Page comes back. I think he should be the one to take the belt off of Kenny Omega. I think it is his time. Kenny Omega's done a great job, but I think it is his time. Next pay-per-view, I'm saying it right now, next pay-per-view, Hangman Page takes the belt off of Kenny Omega. Who do you think Hangman should cash that in on? Should it be Kenny Omega? Should it be Bryan Danielson? Should it be CM Punk? Who should it be? Because essentially, you're right. It is AEW's version of the Money in the Bank briefcase. Who's Hangman Page cashing in on?
No. If he does cash it in, it has to be on Omega. You have to, because that's been the longest standing title holder. You want the biggest impact. The next would be, I think next in line is going to be Daniel Bryanson. Bryan Danielson. And third would be in my ranking CM Punk. I think CM Punk is a slow build. I mean, he's fighting the likes of Hook and the mid-card guide, so he's starting off pretty slow as he gets his bearings, and I think that's the best strategy for him. I don't think yet he's ready to carry the mantle just yet, whereas I think the American Nightmare might be next in line. So we'll see. Adam Hangman Page might be the character that you take the slow build where he cashes in and then loses. So you never know. It's no guarantee. So we shall see how this progresses. But kudos to Kenny Omega. He's held the title and made it important. And this is what AEW is doing, is their titles are not switching every 2 weeks. And that's what you do, is you make the title special. And they're handling it very, very well in my mind.
Man, you remember when Sasha Banks and Charlotte were in that feud, and it was every single week they would exchange the belt?
Oh, yeah.
You remember that? Like when Charlotte says, like, she's like, I'm a 17-time women's champion. I'm like, yeah, it's because like you and Charlotte exchanged it within 10 weeks 9 times. Like, get the hell out of here. It's like fake. Like, they're not doing that on AEW. Every time you get the belt, you can anticipate and expect a long-term title hold, and you can expect a long-term build, which I think is fantastic. Now, I did notice this, and I want to know if you noticed it. Does it feel almost like Rampage? And I don't know, maybe it's just the 1 hour window. It moves very quickly. But to me, it seems like Rampage is just kind of there. Yeah, we got CM Punk this week, and yeah, that was arguably the big match. It wasn't the main event. That was one of those matches that kicked off Rampage. The main event was Ricky Starks and Brian Cage, and that was pretty decent. But to me, Rampage almost feels like it's the overflow, right? We have all this great stuff on Dynamite. We can't fit it in. So we're going to overflow to Rampage. And I know with Rampage, you only really get about 3 matches because it's only an hour and everything moves quickly. But I'm not sure if Rampage gets enough. I don't know if creative time is the right word. It just, to me, doesn't seem like Rampage. It seems almost like Rampage is like the stepchild out of the two. Does it feel like that to you yet?
Not the stepchild. It's just a Friday night at 10. It's just a rough time, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe Tuesday night at 10, but you don't want to put it after. So it's just, you got to go find it. It's tough because it's the end of the week and we're all like ready to bed and things like that. And there's other stuff that's competitive that you want to watch. There's sports, there's news programs, and kind of sometimes date nights. So you got to tape it. So yeah, it's just 1 hour television shows just don't do a whole heck of a lot in regards to professional wrestling. It's just kind of more should be for recaps, but you know, you need time, you need TV time, and it's just another opportunity to make the money. But yeah, it's not anywhere near as must watch as Dynamite is, but they're doing a good job, and that's what they got to do, is they got to find time to create content, and television time is an opportunity to really bring in the revenue, which they need.
So I woke up this morning, and I'm glad you brought up time, and you brought up the time slot. I woke up this morning, and my Twitter was kind of going a little bit crazy, and it was interesting because it was Dave Meltzer responding to something that Tony Khan had sent. And Meltzer's responded tweet, and this was about 8 hours ago, where Meltzer responded to Tony Khan, which was about 10 hours ago. Meltzer said, "I guess we'll see how this goes." When Khan posted, "I saw you're doing a half-hour head-to-head with us. I can't wait to finally beat your main show head-to-head. It's been a long time coming. See you next Friday for AEW Rampage at AEW on TNT." So it appears that we might get some adjustment to the time slot for AEW. Now, I woke up this morning and we went right to recording the show. I haven't had any time to really investigate it. It looks as though we're getting a bit of a shift with some head-to-head programming again. And I think long-term, that is what AEW needs, and that's what AEW wants. I think AEW wants to challenge SmackDown. And I think you're right. The time slot that they have currently, it does make it a bit of a hard watch. Like, you get through 2 hours of SmackDown, and it's 10 o'clock, and it's like, it just sucked up your Friday. A lot of times, people go out on Friday nights. It's the end of the week. They're looking to blow off some steam. And you'll watch SmackDown, and then it's like, all right, now I got to get geared up for an hour of Rampage. And yeah, Rampage moves quick, and yeah, Rampage is a pretty good show. But still, that is a 10 to 11 hour time block, which is not really conducive to ratings. So it'll be interesting to see what AEW does when they do slide in and they do start going head to head with SmackDown. That'll be interesting. So I'm glad you brought that up. It was a nice way to kind of segue into that, and we'll kind of see what happens there. It's interesting though, because I don't know if AEW, like we know AEW beat NXT, right? They beat the pants off of NXT handily. I'm not sure if Rampage does that with SmackDown. I don't know if that happens. That might be one of those battles that they might lose, you know? That's like when you have the bully and you get tired of the bully picking on you, so then you fight back, and then you start picking on the bully, and next thing you know, the bully starts whipping your ass. That might be one of those situations. I'm not sure how that plays out. What do you think? How do you think that plays out?
Ooh, you know, in terms of head-to-head programming, I mean, I like that Tony Khan is really starting to spread his wings a little bit, but when you look at the ratings, it hasn't trended upward. It's kind of scaled back down a little bit, which is kind of in line with some of the critics and cynics who say when you book for Pops, yeah, you can get a couple 100,000 people when you promote it for 2 weeks straight and you use every avenue and resource. But more in line with what builds ratings is compelling storylines, building characters, getting people, you know, to really invest in your product. And unfortunately, it's looking like they're peaking around when they hit big numbers like 1.2, 1.3. And the cynics will say, that's fine. That's hardcore fans, but you're not doing a lot to kind of grow your product. And you might risk potentially, you know, going into that realm of thinking you're bigger than you are, which was kind of fatalistic when we hearken back to what was the downfall of WCW, was when they started to go, oh, we got these characters. I think you need to maybe pump the brakes on that tweet, which I saw earlier on Saturday as well. You need to pump the brakes on that tweet for another 6 months, in my mind. Stop acting like you're in competition with another product and just focus on your own and try to get to the next level of how do we get 2 million viewers? How do we get to 2.5? How do we get revenue that potentially puts us in the marketplace to scoop up every wrestler in the world and to acquire not only wrestlers but territories per se, you know? And so that's where I think Tony Khan is making the mistake, is that I get it. Competitive people always look to their competitor and who's number one and let's start taking shots. But WWE is a different thing. They're a brand. They're a global thing. And it's like they're a conglomerate. You know, you're just starting off as year 3 of a company. So it's, I think, a little premature to start continuing to put the WWE in your crosshairs. And I think it's turning off a certain segment of the cynics. And if you pay attention, I don't know if WWE has wisened up and created like a million burner accounts to hate on AEW, but this AEW Botches account really hammers WWE, and you're starting to see a little bit under the AEW tweets some negativity, some complaints, some talk of like, well, you know, if AEW is so great, they should be smashing WWE. So you're starting to see a little bit of hate coming around, and it's interesting because every single mistake that's highlighted has been put online with the botches, and there is a segment now of WWE supporters that are like, what is this? And it's really interesting online. Me, I'm just a guy that loves wrestling altogether, would like to see the entire world of wrestling improve itself. So the feuds for me, not as passionate as I was before, because WWE is not going anywhere. When a company invests $1 billion in you and then another company does, you're not going anywhere. So I just want to see AEW get in the realm of continuing to put on matches that are excellent and are intriguing. So and so for Tony Khan, I think he's got to put his ego in check just a little bit. All right, is it time for pro wrestling news and notes?
Yes, sir. If you're ready for it. You're also the guy who would watch two pigeons get it on if they were wearing wrestling tights. So it doesn't surprise me that you watch all the wrestling.
Absolutely. Hit me with this week's professional wrestling news and notes.
It has been revealed by Fightful Select that former WWE Universal Champion Braun Strowman held talks with AEW following his WWE release on June 2nd of this year. In the report, Fightful points out that while talks were held, Impact Wrestling is very much the front runner in terms of securing Strowman's signature. The report noted that there is a big push within Impact to get Braun on board. Now, Braun recently did a Q&A where he talked about why he hasn't signed with anybody yet, because he's eligible to sign with wherever he wants. And basically he said, look, I put all my eggs in one basket. That basket got thrown away. So it sounds like he's dealing with a little bit of heartbreak from his release from WWE. He said that he felt like he did a lot of really good work in WWE, and he felt like he was really building towards something spectacular there. And then they basically just cut him, just let him go. And he said he was in a really dark place for a while. So he's just trying to take it slow and kind of figure things out. Sounds like he's a little bit jaded after getting released from WWE. Now, big plans for Finn Balor could be in store on Monday Night Raw. WWE has kept a lot of their draft plans wrapped up, but there is speculation that one of the Raw writers banged the table, and it's in quotes, bang the table for SmackDown's Finn Balor to be drafted to Raw and to be used in the Drew McIntyre role. Now, this hasn't been confirmed, but don't be surprised if he's the 1B to Big E's 1A. Sounds like he could come over to SmackDown, and if something was to happen with Big E, he'd be the guy to kind of take that next place. And remember, Drew McIntyre challenged Big E to a match before McIntyre got drafted over to SmackDown. So don't be surprised if Finn Balor slots into that role. Maybe he could turn from face to heel. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. Now, some possible massive news and a possible return for a troubled WWE wrestler. Dave Meltzer is reporting that Alberto El Patron, a.k.a. Alberto Del Rio, is telling people that he's going to WWE when his legal situation regarding the alleged assault on his ex-girlfriend in San Antonio was cleared up. If you remember, he basically kidnapped, beat, and sexually abused his ex-girlfriend. He's got a whole lot going on. Alberto El Patron is kind of a shitty person. Meltzer continued, "It would actually shock me if WWE would use him. Not that anything is impossible, and WWE could get away with it, while other U.S. companies would be exhorted for it. But I don't think that's the direction that makes any sense for them at this point. So if there was a company to be able to basically withstand that blow, it would be WWE. A company like AEW is not going to touch Alberto El Patron. He's hot like lava. There's no point for them to. Impact wants nothing to do with him either." Meltzer also had some info on what may be taking place with SmackDown in WrestleMania 38. Remember, we teased that earlier, and we talked about how Crown Jewel really plays no part in anything. It's just kind of this one-off show that they build to for weeks, and it makes no sense to any of us. Well, Meltzer said that Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar likely isn't one and done. And the idea is to use the October 21st bout between Lesnar and Reigns at Crown Jewel to build a return to a match at some point. Now, while Meltzer didn't definitively say when that match would happen, he suggested that WrestleMania 38 in Dallas next year is a strong possibility as long as WWE doesn't bring in The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, for the match against Roman Reigns. So it'll be interesting to see what WWE does. Maybe they start working these Crown Jewel matches into some long-term booking, and it actually starts to make sense with the continuity of storylines, and it's not just this one rando one-off where we're just kind of like, why do we care about this? We really don't. Take your payday and shove it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. But that's going to do it for this week's wrestling news and notes, my brother.
And this will conclude episode 200. I went back. So far, so good. I'm into the 180s. And so it's on you, brother. It's if you want to go back and verify it, because I know you're a fact-based guy. So episode 200 in the books. I did reach out to Tommy Dreamer, and he didn't reply. So we did try. I was like, oh, it's 200. Let's see if somebody will come and give us a discussion. And I kind of have a soft spot for someone that's getting, like, pummeled. And it just stinks nowadays because really, it's fascinating now in the world of football, wrestling, that anything that you've done prior to hitting superstardom is fodder for analysis. And Tommy Dreamer, unfortunately right now is in the canceled phase, but I think he'll come back with time, hopefully. So, but he didn't reply. I know that Instagram messaging is not the best way to book guests, but hey, we'll put out there maybe in the universe to talk to a wrestler every now and again. I will say this, though. AEW did reply to me. I said, hey, I work for this company, and I'm a big fan of wrestling. And they said, oh, okay, if you want to apply for credentials here. It was more like I want to be in the Zoom stuff, but I could apply to go down to Miami and pay-per-views and stuff like that. I'm not going to, but that was cool. They replied. So that was the first time in a couple years that AEW, a representative, has reached out. So, hey, making little strides, little cuts and nicks here and there. Make sure, again, follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Anything in the world of wrestling, make sure you hit us up. We're two big marks, smart marks, and we enjoy watching every single product. Thanks, cuz. I look forward to next week's edition, episode 201 of the Doc and Jock Wrestling Podcast.